Hello and welcome. I have with me today Miss Brie Schmidt joining us for the work-life balance equation. And I believe this is actually our fifth episode, if I'm not mistaken. And just wanted to welcome Brie to the show. Brie, tell our audience a little bit more about you.
Yes, thank you for having me. So as we were, just talking, this is one of my passions is work-life balance because it's something that I have worked on myself for, the better part of a decade because I didn't have work-life balance. So I used to work in corporate. I used to work in ad sales for about 10 years. Really saw myself being, a corporate executive. I traveled, 50% of the time, was always in airports, working 60 hours a week, and thought that was normal, and that's what in my 20s, that's what you did. You worked your butt off and you came home, you ate dinner, you went to bed, right? And there wasn't really room for outside things. So I started investing around 28 years old, my late 20s. It was never intended to be a full-time job for me. It was always going to be a side project, a side hobby, own a couple of buildings, whatever. So my first building, we bought a 3-unit. We moved into 1 unit. The plans were never really to make that like an income property or retire early. The plans really were to deconvert the building over time and make it into a single family when our family grew and we had kids. Um, and I was fine with the current lifestyle that I had. What happened was about a year later after we bought our building, my father passed away. He had a very, very aggressive form of cancer, and he passed away literally the day before he was supposed to retire.
Oh,
And we had planned his retirement party and we had to convert it into the wake. And it really messed with me mentally and emotionally because I always thought back of the thing. My dad would always say, like, I'm going to retire after you get married. I'm going to retire after your brother, finishes his PhD program. And then I'm going to go do all these cool things and all these cool places. And he never got to do any of it. And so, it really stuck with me. That was like the big thing of like, crap, I'm 29 years old and I work 60 hours a week and I'm always in airports and I'm working for someone else building, their lifestyle, right? But like I can barely take a vacation, so I remember I was at the airport, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. We had a 6 a.m. flight to Atlanta from Chicago. We had to fly down to Atlanta and then we had to drive down, I believe it was like Columbus, Georgia, which was like a 2.5 hour drive, have a meeting, drive back to the airport, and then fly back that night. And my boss was coming with me. She had just come back from maternity leave. So she had a pump at the airport and we had to be back that night because she had to take care of her baby. And like it was just terrible. And I'm like, I don't want this life. And I remember sitting at the airport with her and I saw a flight alert for Istanbul. Istanbul has like been like my number one place I want to go. Istanbul was like $500 round trip. And I told her like, oh my God, like I'm going to Istanbul. This is great. I'm going to buy these tickets right now. And then, it was like April. And she's like, well, you've got this coming up and this. And she starts like planning out my calendar in her head. And she's like, in October, you can go for like a long weekend. And I was like, you know what? Like, no,
yeah,
this is not what I want. This is about 9 months after my dad passed away. I'm like, I got to figure out something different. Because this for the next 30 years of my life is not what I had in mind. And it's what my dad did. And that's
yeah.
it's just not going to work.
Yeah,
So
and I'm so sorry,
I don't know.
Bree, about your dad. I mean, what a brutal wake-up call for sure, but wow, does that put things in perspective?
It really did. I don't look at it as a negative thing, life happens, right? And you don't have control over things. I always say there's the only two things you have control over in this world is your actions and your reactions, right? That's it.
Yes.
So my reaction to it came out the best way possible, which was I need to change my life now so that I'm not in the same situation, you
Mhm.
know. And that's really what fueled my life. So when I look back, I'm 39 years old. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that out loud. In my head, I'm still in my 20s. I'm definitely not this old, but the
You
way I
don't
look
look it. You don't look it, Bree.
at the way I see my life is I have 3 segments of my life. I had my, my before real estate investing life, which was when I worked corporate. Then I had my real estate investing life. And then now I had my first child when I was 36. So now I have my mom life, and they're so different, and I've had to adapt and evolve, which is why this whole, work-life balance thing kind of came through that. So anyways, long story short, after that trip with my boss in April, I think I quit my job like 2 months later. I was like, nope, I'm out. Like I needed to sink or swim and figure this out. So at the time we'd already bought 3 investment properties. Like I said, we bought 2 investment properties, and the third one was a live-in flip. So we completely renovated a house from the 1970s, pulled equity out of that, because we increased the value through the BRRRR method, is what the buzzword is now. So we had cash on hand, and we needed to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to build this life. So that's how the real estate investing part of it was born. It was accumulation of all those things that happened in a very short period of time. That was a really big wake-up call. So I said, I started looking at investment properties. I'm in Chicago, properties here. The time were like, $500,000 a pop. If you need 10 buildings, you need to be able to retire or, be financially free. It's going to take a lot of capital to get to that point when price points are so high. So I ended up investing in the Milwaukee market. I quit my job like 2 days before we were buying our first set of properties. And I ended up buying 18 properties in 9 months. And then I bought another 10 properties with partners in the next 9 months. So we had a really, really aggressive growth strategy. And that's how I got into the real estate investing time. The same point, I quit my job after 10 years of working in corporate and started, building this portfolio in Milwaukee. And it ended up not being as much work as I thought it was. I thought I'd be up, I'm up there every week, but like 1 day a week. So I thought I'd be one of those people that like would just chill at the coffee shop and like read a book during the day, like, oh, I've got free time. I can just relax. Pfft, I'm not. I lasted like 6 weeks and was like, I'm bored out of my mind. So through that,
I can't see you being sitting there reading and just
no. It sounds good in your head, right? You're like, I'm just gonna chill and like take time to myself. So through that, I ended up starting a brokerage firm. So Second City Real Estate was started that summer. We are one of the largest boutique brokerage firms that specializes in investors. We did $60 million in business last year. 95% of that was investment properties. So we work within the Chicagoland market for that. And then eventually, about a year or two later, I started the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, which is a 2-day conference. We're the largest real estate investors conference in the Midwest. So
wow,
things got a little out of control. But then it was through, then I had 3 companies and 3 jobs that were, taking up so much of my time. I had recently got divorced and had met my now husband. And it was, I believe, our second date. And it was like a random Tuesday. He had like a day off, and we decided to go, spend the day at the park and go out to lunch. And at one point throughout our date, he stopped me and looked at me and said, you need to get off your phone. Like, I took time out of my life to spend with you and get to know you. And you're constantly like taking calls or answering emails. So like, if that's what kind of person you're going to be, let me know now. Let's just end this. And I was like, okay, like, he's got a really good point, because at the time, like, I was still working, 50, 60 hours a week, and all the businesses are very reactive. A property comes up, a client wants to see, you've got to drop what you're doing and go do it. With investment properties, there's a problem, right? A furnace goes out or something floods, right? You've got to be on top of things. But he really put things in perspective for me. And that's when I started my work-life balance journey. So that's the short version of it right there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Brie. And I just wanted to say, wow, I mean, you've accomplished so much. And I just love how you shared how you got to the point where you are now. And so excited to talk more about all this other stuff. But I did want to pause briefly, because some of the folks in our audience may not have the financial means to just quit their job.
Of course.
They may not have already properties, or other streams of income coming in. So, but you're scrappy. I know you're scrappy. So,
Mhm.
if you were in shoes like those where you didn't really have any income coming in, number one, do you think you'd make the same decision in terms of just quitting right then and there? Or what would you recommend for folks who maybe don't have that other income and they kind of have to work?
So it's dual edged, right?
Yes.
Um, so in my brokerage firm, right, I work with a lot of new investors who
Hmm.
don't have any properties, who are looking to start on this path of what we call financial freedom, right? For them, it makes absolute sense to keep their W-2 job, because
Yes.
financing is so much easier when you have a W-2 job. Like, the only reason I quit my job was we were done with residential financing, which is general 30-year fixed conventional financing, right?
Mhm.
We were already getting too big and we were growing so fast because you can have a max of 10 loans. And we knew that we were buying 10 new properties in the next 4 months. So we were going to be capped out. So we were moving into commercial financing, which is a different element, right? And it's not based on your personal income. It's based
Mhm.
on performance of the property, and it's based on other metrics that the commercial lender has. So I remember asking my commercial lender before, so I quit my job like a couple days before we closed on these properties, was, if I quit my job, does this affect our ability to buy more properties? And he had said no. If he had said yes, I would have absolutely stayed at my job,
Yeah.
100%. But we were in a position that where we were going on our growth trajectory, it didn't matter what I was doing for work. And I absolutely said, I generally liked my job. I didn't hate it. I just knew that for 30 more years, this was not what I wanted.
Right.
So if I needed to stay another 5, 10 years, right, to build our portfolio, right, then I would have absolutely done that. It just wasn't the case with us. So keep that in mind, right? Like, if you change jobs, if you move from a W-2 to a self-employed, or you start your own business, you have to have 2 full years of tax returns to be able to count that income towards investing. So
Okay.
for most people, like, the first year it takes you, you're maybe 25% of your potential as far as income's concerned. Second year, you're 50%, right? Third year is when you get into 100%, but they use the average of the two. So then you need your years 3 and 4 at 100% to be able to count that. But then you got to wait till your tax returns filed. So now you're talking 5 years before you're able to use your full self-employment income to qualify for a loan, right?
Hmm.
So keep that W-2 job, so that you can do it on the side. I could have, we had 8 units in Chicago. And at that point, we had, like, the first year, we had 26 units in Milwaukee. I could have absolutely managed all that on the side. I didn't need to quit my job. I'm really glad I did, though. I had my husband's income, right? So that was our basis of things. Like, we figured out, we went through the numbers and all that. Like, we could scrape by if we didn't make any money from these properties.
Hmm.
We could scrape by on his income alone. We'd be eating ramen noodles, right? We wouldn't be doing fun things, but we could still cover our mortgage, our bills, and make it work, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I make way more money now, even just from the brokerage, than I ever did working corporate. Um,
Um,
but I had the opportunity to find what I was passionate about, what I loved doing, and then grow the business organically. So by the time I started the business in 2014, by the time I met my now husband in 2017, 2018, something like 2018, um, the business was already established. I'd already put in all those hours building it up. I was already in my 4 years, right, where it was much easier. But those beginning years, I wasn't making enough money to live off of if I didn't have a secondary income to help balance that out. Um, so I think that's one of the things that, especially with newer investors, is they think they have to do everything right now, or they see someone, they hear a podcast, or they see someone who has this, incredible growth story, and it's not always that way. Slow and steady wins the race. Like, most of my clients, we
mhm.
look at buying like one property every year or two, every 18 months on average. Um, and then, like, slowly building that portfolio. And then once they're in a position at like year 4 or 5,
Mhm.
then they're in a phase now where they could quit their job and rely on that income. It might not replace their entire income, but if
Right.
that's their passion, again, it's not everyone's passion. For some people, investing is a side hobby, and it will always be a side hobby. It
Mhm.
just took over my life, and totally engulfed, everything that I do, because
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And that's not the case for everyone.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, because just hearing your successes, it's like, oh, wow. And then I can just picture some people, all right, well, that's not me, but you saying, hey, focusing on just one investment, per year.
Yeah,
That's great. Great start. Yeah. So bring us back to, all right, you have this other realization that, all right, you're kind of interested in your now husband. And how do you go from, checking your phone, because that's kind of an addictive behavior, and it's not an
absolutely.
easy thing to just stop cold turkey. So tell us a little bit more about how you made that shift.
So it started with logging my time. So again, with three businesses that are very reactive, like there's always something to do. Um, and I found that I didn't know where I was spending my time. So I started an Excel sheet, right? And every couple hours throughout the day, I'd write down what I did so far that morning. I spent 30 minutes answering emails, right? I spent an hour and a half updating my accounting, and I started kind of tracking, right? And then at the end of the week, I kind of like resorted. I love Excel. I've got like 500 million Excels for everything. It's insane. But I resorted, like I categorized things and sorted and like reflected on my week and was like, wow, for example, I'm spending 10 hours a week on advertising. I'm like getting lists right for my business and, pulling together stuff. I hate advertising, hate it. Like it's a task that when it comes up on my calendar, like I just dread doing it. I procrastinate it, right? And it takes me so long to do it because I just don't enjoy it. So then I looked at websites like Fiverr. Do you know what Fiverr is?
Yeah.
Fiverr for outsourcing. I can in 5 minutes click some buttons and tell some random person, hey, I want to make a postcard with these images, right? And I want to go to every household within a 5-mile radius of this address. And it cost me like $50 and they turn it around like the next day. I'm like,
Wow.
that would have taken me 10 hours and I would have hated every minute of it. So then every week for like this went on for like a month, I would start looking at my list of what I would do for the week and fine tuning things. So I outsourced what I don't enjoy doing, but then I also kind of realized that I was still very all over the place.
Mhm.
Um, so the other thing that I did was I would block off my time and not multitask. So like
Okay.
for me, one of the big parts of my business on the investment side is accounting. I like to every month I go through all of our, I put everything through our property management system, go through reporting, all that stuff. But I need to be focused to do it, A, and B, it takes me like a whole day to do it if I'm not focused. So what I started doing was blocking off time to do that and turning my phone on silent and
Mhm.
closing out all my email tabs. And so
Great.
that I was able to do that. Like what would take me, like I said, usually like 6 to 8 hours when I was messing around with other things, I can actually do it in 3 hours when I'm focused.
Mhm.
Um, so then it was working on like those kind of things. Okay, when can I do them? I also work best when I'm in the mood to do it. Let's say that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, Especially now with kids, like it's hard.
Yeah.
Um, the other day, what was it? Monday. I got up at 4:15 in the morning and,
Oh.
I got up with the baby and he went back to sleep and then I couldn't go back to sleep.
Oh.
So, I got up, my kids don't get up till 6:30. So I started working, I got a ton accomplished. And by 8:30 in the morning, like I was done for the day. I was mentally exhausted. So in that scenario, if I had accounting scheduled for that day, I would move it to another day because
Mhm.
I know when I'm tired and cranky and I'm just not in the mood to
Mhm.
do something, it's gonna take me twice as long.
Right.
So it was really, like I said, fine tuning that stuff that over about a month it took me. to really get a good grasp of, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is where I can improve things. This is where I can make things more efficient. This is where I can outsource things, right? And really fine tuning that to-do list. And working on, time blocks and then adjustable time blocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
because I was going to say, I know sometimes there's that law, that Parkinson's law, where it's basically however much time you give yourself to do a task is how long it'll take. So if you're
yeah,
allowing yourself several days a week versus 1 hour, there's that piece. And then there's also, like you said, kind of taking into account your own mood, your energy level, and all that. And at the same time, making sure, I know one thing that I tend to do is I'll underestimate how long it takes me to do something. So I guess that time tracking really gives you the raw data to know, like, how much time is it really taking me?
yeah.
And did I guess you were able to figure out between the two of, well, overestimating or underestimating the time, and then just giving yourself a time, and then also the mood, like, is there, yeah, you mentioned some flexibility with
Absolutely.
so how does that, what does that look like? And especially, and I know it's tough because if you have a W-2, obviously the time that you have to work with is a lot more limited, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you can't still apply what you're talking about in even the W-2 work, for example. So how do you how do you make that work for you?
So, well, two things I'll get into. Having worked a W-2, like a corporate job for almost 10 years, and now I've been self-employed working from home for 8 years.
Yeah.
I wish I would have known now what I knew then, because corporate culture sucks and it
Yeah.
is such a waste of time. It's amazing. Like I said, right now I work about 20 to 30 hours a week.
Okay.
I accomplish way more in my 20, 30 hours a week than I ever did working 50, 60 hours a week in corporate. The amount of meetings about meetings and, bullshit that goes on in corporate, like I would never work in an office again. Absolutely, like, refuse. First of all, I work in my pajamas every day, so that's great. So for me, like if you have a flexible, like, and now especially since COVID, a lot of corporate jobs are work from home.
Yeah.
You could still apply that inside and outside of office hours. Especially if you work from home and you don't have to actually go to an office. So for me, I get up before my kids do. So my kids are almost 3 and almost 1.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So I get up, first thing in the morning before the kids get up. I have my coffee and I go through my to-do list, which is something I'll talk about in a minute.
And how much more time, like you said, they get up at 6:30. So like how much lead time are you waking up? So
hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unfortunately. So you ever listened to one of my, I've been doing podcasts for, I don't know, what are we at, 8 years now? If you ever listen to one of my earlier podcasts before I had kids, I always would say that I knew I was financially free when I never had to set an alarm clock.
Okay.
That was one of my big things. Like I would just, I loved the ability to wake up when my body naturally woke up and not have to set an alarm clock and get ready and go somewhere.
Exactly.
And it was like one of my proudest accomplishments. And then karma came back when I had kids, and it gave me my daughter didn't sleep past 5:30 till she was over 2 years old.
Oh my God.
So I became a morning person.
Were you
like
not
an early.
before? Were you
I would
not?
get up around 7, 8.
Okay.
I wouldn't sleep till like 10. But now I'm like, if I sleep past 6, like, wow, like that's amazing. So I still don't set an alarm, but generally speaking, I'm up around 5:30. And then, my kids get up between 6:30 and 7. My daughter goes to school at 8. The baby takes a nap at 10. Like I don't really work past 12. My day is done from 6 a.m. to 12. And I work around my children's general schedules when I can get things done uninterrupted. After 12, my daughter comes home and she takes a nap and we hang out the baby. Then the baby takes, like, my day is pretty much done. I'm only doing like responsive things. Someone sends an email that needs immediate attention, those kind of things. But after 12, I generally probably work maybe an hour, maybe two tops. But mostly I just don't work after 12. I get everything done in the mornings, and that's when I'm most efficient. So again, if you have a work from home schedule that allows you, if your job says you have to get, A, B, C, D done this week, right? And it has to be done on certain days, you have deadlines, but they don't dictate what hours you work. You could still apply a lot of those principles, not closing out your emails when you're doing tasks, working when you have the focus to do it, powering through. And some days I get so much done. And some days I said, I'm in a crap mood. I got up really early. I'm just tired. Like I could probably work maybe an hour or two the whole day. So again, I really just try to exploit my energy when I have it and I'm in those moods to get things done, and try to get ahead of things. So the other thing is the to-do list. I'm smiling because this is so dorky, but this is like my favorite thing. And this is the big change for me. So there's a book called Getting Things Done. That is probably the biggest life-changing book for me that came out of like all this stuff. And I read it. I was actually too busy to read the book. So it was suggested to me by a friend, and I didn't have time in my life to read this book. So there was a Cliff Notes version on Amazon. I bought it and we were driving up. We were going out of town for the weekend. So I brought it on my Kindle and read it. And that really was the pivoting point for all this, was how to change things for me. So why the book is great. I'll point out it has much more than just this. These are my big takeaways. One of the big things for me was writing everything down. So I have a notebook. I write everything down. So the book talks about like how much mental energy we spend trying to remember things or remembering to do things. So this takes a while, right? The habit takes a while to adapt. But when you write things down and then you start thinking like, oh, I have to do this, you're thinking about that task, remind yourself it is written down, right? And it will be handled. It's on the to-do list. The to-do list is set. So that really helped me with like sleeping at night. I had a lot of insomnia, like thinking about, oh, tomorrow I would go through my to-do, like what do I need to do tomorrow? So I started bringing my notebook to bed with me. And when I would start thinking of like, oh, I forgot I got to do this tomorrow, I'd get up, I'd write it down. And then I'd keep telling myself, it's written down. You will deal with it tomorrow. It's time to go to sleep. So that took, probably a month or two of reestablishing that habit every day to be able to do it. Also, what works is calendar reminders for me. So if I'm out of the house and I think of like, oh, I've got to do this by tomorrow, I'll give myself a calendar reminder when I get home to write it down in my to-do list. So that's one of the big focuses, is writing everything down. Then the other thing is doing your small tasks first. So every week you have your to-do list, you can obviously add on to it. But every morning they say anything that takes less than 5 minutes, you do right away. And then you cross it off the list. And there's that satisfaction of crossing things off the list. So if I've got, 10 things on my to-do list for today, and in the first half an hour, I'm able to cross off 4 or 5 of them. Well, now I'm looking at my list like, wow, I'm 40% done with the day, and it becomes less overwhelming and gives you that sense of accomplishment first thing in the morning. Another thing is breaking up tasks. So you're talking about procrastination, right? So I will use that marketing example again. So I'm going to send, I just sold a house, right? I'm going to send a postcard to people in the area that I just sold a house to. So first I need to design the creative, then I need to print the postcards. Then I need to get the mailing list, right? Then I need to address the postcards, and then I need to take them out to actually the mail. So instead of writing down marketing postcard, which is all 5 of those things at once, I'm writing down each individual task and doing things one by one. So that way, designing the postcard, right, that can take me, an hour. So instead, and then getting the mailing list, right? So it's about breaking up the tasks. The example they use in the book is sending out Christmas cards. You've got to buy the cards. You've got to get everyone's address. You've got to, that becomes too big of a task and you're going to procrastinate it. So breaking it up into smaller ones and writing all those down helps your perception of the task and making it more manageable in your head. The other thing that really helps too is every week you start a fresh to-do list. So every Monday I start a fresh list and I take over anything left over from last week and I put it onto the new list. If after 2 weeks, if it's been on there for 2 weeks, you need to either decide essentially to shit or get out the pot.
Okay.
Like either it's not important enough to go on to a third week, or you need to stop what you're doing and do it right now and get it done. And maybe you've been procrastinating because it's too big of a task. So maybe you need to break it up into smaller ones, right? And then it's more, then that will help you not procrastinate. So that was also part of it too, was like prioritizing your tasks, understanding what's important, and then sometimes I just don't, after it's been there for 2 weeks, I think in my head, like, you know what, like, it's really not that important. I can text out Christmas cards this year, right? Like, I just don't, I don't need to go to the printer and, do all that, whatever. But it's all those things encompassing that really helped focus things over for me, into being more efficient. Like I love waking up and looking at my to-do list and crossing things off in the morning.
Yes.
It's
no, that's great. And I like the idea of just kind of smaller wins to, get your dopamine hit, like, oh, I checked it off on the box. Cause that's kind of what I find a lot of my clients and me, we're all addicted to. The only question I have is, I find that there's a a couple questions come up. One, you mentioned like Fiverr or Upwork, those that, can do things for you. So what's the difference between you doing like a quick 5-minute task and a quick win versus, all right, how to outsource it? And maybe if it's on the list longer than the 2 weeks, it's going to go to the, outsourcing.
It depends, right? So, it depends on what you like. Cause I love accounting. I'm a super big dork.
Okay.
I will never outsource my accounting because I actually enjoy doing it. And it's a very, I could absolutely 100%, said I've got 14 bank accounts across 3 different businesses. We have about 400 transactions a month that all need to be, accounted for. I still like doing it. I could absolutely outsource that, but I feel that by doing it, I'm staying up to date with what's going on in my business.
Okay.
So I'm not just like reading a report, right? So like that for me is something I won't outsource, but I outsource things that I don't like to do or that I'm not good at.
Okay.
Understanding where my skill sets are. And doing like, for example, the real estate summit, the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. I have a partner on that, John. He's got he used to work for GM in marketing. Like that's his background. He loves the aesthetic of things, right? How things look, where the camera angle is going to go on stage. That is not my gig at all. So like we share a business together and it works out so well for us because I'm the back end details, the logistics, right? Planning the catering, planning the speakers, writing the contracts. Like that is what I enjoy doing. And so as soon as like the event is planned, which is mainly like, obviously he inputs on it, but like the details and the contracts and all that stuff is my job. And then as soon as like the site's live and we're ready to go as far as marketing the site, he really takes over. And that's like his job. So like that's a way that we've split things to work within our own skill sets. And really we each get to do what we enjoy doing and they're complementary skill sets. So that works out. If it was just me doing it for some reason, which, never plan a conference by yourself, terrible idea. It would be so much work, but I would then outsource that. I would hire a social media manager. I would hire an advertising.
For us, it's okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's a nice synergistic partnership for sure. And then the other question I had was because I know one of the, I guess, productivity tips that works really well is focusing on your top priority and making headway in that. And I'm sure you do that as well. So how do you integrate that piece within the getting the small things done and the quick wins? Because that's kind of like,
a balance.
Maybe it is. So I'm just curious.
So that goes into time versus money, right? What's your time worth? So
Yeah.
this is an ongoing discussion in my household. I love my husband's great. My husband grew up in Eastern Europe and is the cheapest person you will ever meet. The amount of time he spends on the stupid, like, mind blowing to me. For example, he wanted to get his tires changed. He will spend like 20 hours, right? Like calling 10 different tire shops just
Mm-hmm.
to save $10,
Mm-hmm.
right? To get his tires installed. Like, time versus money. It's one of our ongoing discussions in our house. So I look at what's revenue generating for me. And I handle revenue generating tasks first. So that's part of
Yeah.
like the ongoing process, right? Of what am I spending my time doing, right? What do I like and I don't like? But also, what is revenue generating for me? So if I have 3 tasks at hand, like I need to get these 3 things done today, right? My daughter comes home in an hour. Like once my daughter comes home from school, like,
Yeah.
it's a up
Yeah.
in the air. Um, you know, I always choose the revenue generating task first.
Okay.
So for me, that's usually on the brokerage side is clients, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um,
Right.
and then unless the other tasks, even the small ones if they're not time sensitive, they can absolutely go to another day, so that's really what focus has changed is prioritizing revenue generating tasks.
That's helpful. That's really helpful. Yeah, because it is a, how do you feel? And especially maybe if you're more low energy or don't feel like doing something,
Yeah.
maybe those quick 5 minutes kind of fill in something where you're still being productive. But then when you're at your best energy, all right, well, this is now client facing time or what I do
Yeah.
best. So, okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm a talker, right? Like I always joke, like, I could never write a book, right? No one would ever buy it because it would look like a 5-year-old wrote it. Like I'm a much better verbal communicator. So like when I've got, client calls, I schedule them back to back to back. So I'll
Well,
do like 3 hours straight of
yeah.
client calls because the first call gets me so energized, right? And I love talking about real estate or what I'm doing, so that the energy then carries over to the next calls,
Yeah.
so that's how I'll block my time. I have certain days that I take phone calls and,
Hmm.
and do interviews and these kind of things because I know that I'm at my peak energy, right? I'm going to want to do them. But then, said there's days where I don't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm not in the mood and I just move everything over to the next day, right? I'll do the bare minimum of what I have to do that day for like if I've got a deadline or something like that. But otherwise, if it can wait, I'll just wait for another day.
Hmm. And I would say I get your point about like, hey, you prefer verbal and that's your primary or preferred method of communication. But I would say not true about the book because I've had folks who are not great at the writing piece, but they have hired people to
Oh yeah,
interview them. And
that's
you
an outsource,
and you have
right?
so much so much good information, Brie. Your whatever your book or whatever that looks like, it would be so helpful. So I wouldn't say never, but
But that's a perfect
yeah,
example of what I'm talking about, right? If
yeah,
I wanted to write a book, I'm
right.
terrible at the English language, my God. I would outsource it.
Uh-huh.
I would find someone where I could either record audio for
Yeah.
them and they can
Yeah.
convert it,
Yeah.
whatever. But that's an example of like if I got hired to write a book, but I didn't do it myself, it would take me probably 2 years because I'd be procrastinating because I don't enjoy writing.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy talking verbally. So it's a
Yeah,
perfect example of what you would do to optimize your time, right? And work around your own personal skill set.
exactly. Exactly. And speaking of because those are some mindset types of things that people have to wrap their heads around. So what would be a few key mindsets that you helped you adapt to a much more balanced life? Because, again, I'm just thinking you guys being on that park bench and he's just like, hey, look, I'm serious I'm interested in you, but if this is how you are, this is just not going to work. That's huge. So what kinds of mindset shifts really helped you to get into balance, Brie?
Well, I don't know. So the story of my husband's a little bit interesting because I met my husband 3 days after I got divorced.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd not been on a date in 8 years. So I literally just went out with the first guy. I created like an online dating profile, whatever. I'm like, I'm gonna go out with the first person that asks me because I need to rip the band-aid off, Back
Yeah.
in my 20s when everyone was single, dating was awesome. But now in my mid 30s, like what kind of people am I gonna get? Like this is
Right.
gonna be terrible. So like I literally went out with the first person that asked me, and our second date was like 8 hours long. And he at one point was like, "When are you gonna marry me?" Like
Wait,
we had,
this is your
yeah,
husband now? The first guy,
we got
really?
first. I only went on one date. We got married 6 months later. Like we had this world, like it was one of those stories of like when you know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely did not in my mid-30s post-divorce world. We did not imagine this happening. But we had such a immediate connection that within 6 weeks we were already looking at rings and moving in. We already moved in together for 6 weeks. So when he said something to me about, like, hey, this is not going to work if you're not going to spend quality time with me and make me a priority, like
Yeah.
that was a wake up call. Like there was no mindset change. It was, you know
Mhm.
what, he's right. Like I want to make him a priority,
Yeah.
right? He should be my priority. I need to figure out how to adjust the rest of my life around this because this is what I want. So there wasn't really like a mindset shift. It was more of
Okay.
a wake up call.
Okay.
Um, but the progress of all this then happened over time. Said, by the time we got married, then we were, we're not spring chickens. So we were talking about, having kids in a year, what life would be like once you have children, right? What kind of parents we wanted to be, what are, who's going to stay home, how are we going to work out childcare? It's like all those were discussions very early on into our relationship and things that we had to plan for. So that's where a lot of this stemmed from, was like, hey, if we're going to have kids, like we want to be present in our children's lives. We want to be able to, it's a nice day. Like I'm in Chicago. So today's, crappy and 30, but last week we had 50s. So I can take the afternoon off and we can go with the kids to the zoo, like doing those kind of things. That was always part of the plan. So all
Yeah.
of this shift and this working and this, tailoring my life schedule around things was
Yeah.
really all in anticipation for having the life I wanted with my kids.
Okay. Okay. So for you, it was always planned. It was always intentional. And this
Once
is
I met him, yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Once I met him, he had made me realize that I was still working the same amount of hours I was working and doing
Mhm.
corporate.
Mhm.
You know, I
And those
had,
are hard habits to break.
yeah, I had gone from, I'd gone from making else money, right, to making myself money, which is what I wanted, and having the freedom to be able to make my own decisions as far as like, travel, all that stuff. But I wasn't actually living it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what he made me realize, was I wasn't living what I was supposed to be living by doing all
Right.
this in the first place.
Okay.
So now, now I work 20 to 30 hours a week. We spend, most afternoons after 12 o'clock is when it's generally family time. We travel 8 to 10 weeks a year.
Oh,
That's also a big thing for us
great.
too.
Yeah.
We just traveled for the first time with the baby. It was tolerable. With two kids, it just, let me tell you. But we're able to, so, this summer we got COVID. Then my daughter got hand, foot, and mouth. And then the baby got 4 teeth. And
Uh,
then the kids got adenovirus, which is like a 2 week
my
hell of a sickness. And
God.
then the baby had a sleep regression. And like
Whoa.
it was like 6 weeks of like
That's brutal.
terrible in our house. And my husband's like, we need a break. Absolutely. Where do we want to go? Somewhere with a beach. Great. Let's leave in 2 weeks and go to Mexico. And that's what we did. Like, so we were able to, work things out. Like we needed a break. So we booked a trip and in 2 weeks we were in Mexico. So that's the kind of life that I wanted.
Mhm.
And this is all the work that I had to do to get there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one of the other big things that has made, probably, again, the to-do list has been amazing for me. The other big thing that's made a huge impact on my time
Uh-huh.
is I don't take personal meetings.
Okay. Yeah, I think I
So
remember that. Yeah.
this is one that is a hard adjustment for other people. It's not a hard adjustment for me.
Okay.
Um, because again, like I'm a girl, you're a girl, we're women, we're not girls. You got to put on makeup, you got to brush your hair, you got
Right.
to straighten your hair, curl
Right.
your hair, you got to look presentable. Like you guys can't see I'm wearing pajama pants underneath this, so like to actually, like, for me to go have coffee with someone,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? It's not just, I'm not out and about. I work from home. I have for 8 years. I'm not like just out and about, like doing things where I can just go meet you for coffee. Like I got to get ready. I got to, do all
Yeah.
that. That's 45 minutes. Then I got to drive there. right? Then when I gotta not look at my phone while we're having this hour-long
Right.
conversation, and then I gotta drive back. So like now we're talking like it's been 3 hours out of my time to have an hour-long
Right.
meeting. And
Yeah.
now I'm backlogged because I haven't checked my email in 3
Yeah.
hours. So then
Exactly.
like the rest of the day, like, so I just say no. I do not do in-person meetings. Like hard no. But like when people want to have a meeting with me,
Mm-hmm.
I try as nicely as I can. I'm trying not to, ask why, and like, oh, just wanted to, pick your brain or
Right.
talk
Yeah.
synergies. No, thank you. No, unless you can give me a reason why I don't spend time with my children to take this meeting,
Ooh.
or why this meeting makes me money, like how this is going to impact my revenue,
Okay.
I just say no.
Great.
And so again, some
Okay.
people,
So if it's somebody where it's a business opportunity where you could work together and you could generate revenue, then you would take that meeting. But you're just
phone
saying
meeting,
people,
only phone.
oh, phone meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, will
Nice.
not. Because
Okay.
what can I, like, there's not much I can accomplish,
Yeah.
especially at the initial meetings, right?
Right.
So like let's use an example of trying to think of an example. Let's talk about, a business opportunity, right? So someone has a business that they would like to partner with me on, or, would be a
Mhm.
opportunity, right? That initial conversation about what is that business, right? How could we work together? All that stuff,
Yeah.
that can absolutely be done on the phone. you
Yeah.
know,
For sure.
Once we start, like now that we've had maybe like 3 or 4 conversations, right?
Mhm.
And now we want to actually like sit down, go over Excel
Yeah.
documents together, go through P&Ls, right? Like that can be in person. But
Okay.
until we get to that point, there's really no reason for us to meet in person or do Zoom calls too. I hate Zoom
Right.
calls.
Okay.
Um, so that's been a really big eye opener. So I'm a realtor, as you know.
Yeah.
Once a week I get a call from a lender or something
Yeah.
like, hey, I want to take you out to coffee
Right.
and talk about how we can do business together. you
Right.
know and my response is, what can you do that's different than what my current guy does? And
Right.
the answer is always nothing.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
still ask the question, but the answer is like most loan officers do the same thing.
Mhm.
My loan officer I work with is number 30 in the country. I don't need a backup. In 7 years I've never needed a backup.
Right.
So there's no point of us even having conversation, let alone meeting for coffee to talk about it.
Right. That makes sense. But then what about rapport building, or you're just at the stage in your business where, you know what? Your time's so valuable. You've got all these companies you're running or businesses you're running that it has to be a hard no. But maybe would your advice be different for someone starting out who needs to build those relationships? Maybe they do take some of those in-person meetings just for the rapport building.
Why can't you just do it over the phone? Like, what rapport building do you
Well,
really need to do
you're
in
right.
person?
Most of the things can be done over the
you
phone,
know
but I
so
would
like if the clients are different, but still, like, I don't meet with clients until we're seeing houses, you know
okay. Okay.
because what's the point? Like, we can all when a client comes to me and says, hey, look, I'm looking to do this is my goal with investing,
Yeah.
right? And I want you to help me.
Yeah.
We can talk through big ideas. I can talk through, hey, generally speaking, I can get you this cap rate in this area with this budget. And I can show you some examples of properties that I've done and like with what you're looking for.
Mhm.
But I also can't guarantee that I can find you that in the next year. So
Yeah.
until we actually, like, we can talk hypotheticals all day long,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean that it's going to actually happen, right? Markets shift, right? Things change. So until we're actually like looking at properties in person,
Mhm.
right? That's when I meet them usually. And then we can talk specifics, right? And then we can work on fine tuning, our goals. Hey, we don't like this, or we love this about this
Right.
house, but we don't like this. So that's when we meet in person to go through that stuff. Like, I
Yeah.
can't show investment properties or apartment buildings people and not be in person. That has to absolutely be in person. That cannot be done over the phone or video.
Sure.
But until we get to that point, like when it's just talking about what your strategy is, right? What you need, that doesn't
Interesting.
need to be in person,
Right, right. Well, I
you know?
guess, maybe it's because I have a sales background and they've
Yeah.
always trained us that you have
Yeah.
to go build rapport and meet the person. But you're
You
right,
don't.
it can be done. Another thing is, if you're the kind of person like you are, Brie, where you're just getting results, people are like flocking to you because you can get stuff done, then there's really no reason. And then you will when you can. But maybe for someone who's in a role where they have to, like, the lifeline of their business is to build those relationships. I think the only thing that the in-person thing brings is a little bit of chemistry and something that you can't get, like us all going through COVID, like, that the in-person thing's a totally different experience. And I'd say connection and more the rapport building. But like you said, if there's no point to it, there's really no reason to meet.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on like the practicality of it. But at the same time, it's like, I prefer phone over Zoom as well.
Yeah.
And actually, I feel honored. I feel honored I get to chat with you because I'm like, you don't take these meetings. So everybody be thankful that Brie is with us today. Anyway,
But
so
this is this is one of my passions, right? Is work-life balance.
yeah.
But again, like it goes down to, there's no hard set, this is how you have to do things, right? There's always going to be outstanding circumstances and situations. But I just found declining the sheer volume of them in general, when they didn't make sense for me to do in person,
Yeah.
was really what was important.
Okay.
Because like even with, even in the real estate world, we'll get, before COVID, 4 or 5 times a week, and either an agent or a lender, right, or an insurance person was contacting me like, hey, let's go out for coffee and chat.
Right.
There was no real purpose of the meeting. It was just, let's get to know each other, right? And maybe in the future we might cross paths, or there might be an opportunity for business.
Yeah.
Like, there's no need for that.
Right.
If you have a deal that you think my clients would like, send it over to me and I can review it and let you know. But there's no reason for us to just meet in person for an hour and chit chat about life, because at some point in the next 3 years, right, something might come up that causes us to work together. Like, there's no reason for that.
Yeah. I think it's probably more important for the people who, like, they have to like the person to do business with the person. That's probably where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah, but so I'll give you a great example, because this just happened last night. So I've got this client. I bought his investment property with him in 2014. I've known him for whatever that is, 8 years. He's a giant pain in the butt, right? He's a very, he's a difficult person to work with.
Okay.
So he is not a licensed realtor, but he thinks he knows enough about the business to do it himself. So he calls me last night and says, hey, listen, we want to offer on this property. We saw it in open house 2 months ago. It just price dropped. And I've been trying to go through the seller's agent directly, and it's not going anywhere because she's refusing to submit our offer, and I'm like, well, that's illegal. You can't refuse to submit an offer. It's against the law. But I then find out, like, she keeps telling him, like, I cannot be a dual agent, which is the rules of her firm, which most firms do not allow dual agency. Like, I need you to sign this agreement that I do not represent you. I have no fiduciary responsibility to you. And like, he refuses to sign it. And then I find out, like, the offers he's sending are like a piece of paper with like bullet points. Like, no, we have like a 13-page so all of it, I'm like, you're going about this the wrong way. She has tried explaining to you multiple times that by you going directly to her is against her firm's policy, A. B, you're not even submitting a proper offer. You haven't even submitted a pre-approval or gotten a pre-approval. So like, technically your offer isn't really valid in her eyes. And you just keep berating her, and just trying to force her into this situation that she's legally not allowed to get into, because you're asking her questions that would go against our licensing laws. So he comes to me, he's like, so I need you to write this offer. I'm like, you should have called me from the beginning,
Right.
So I go through the process. We get, they talk to a bank, we get their pre-approval. I call her to talk to her about it and find out that they just accepted another offer. And she's like, literally an hour ago, we just signed it. And so, but again, like, I had to, I don't want to say apologize, but I do kind of explain to her that this client, the reason for his actions and why he was doing what he was doing, because he thought that it would be easier and cheaper for him to, for there
Oh,
only to be one agent. And I had
dang.
to explain to him, like, listen, there's, we could
Yeah.
lose our license by this kind of stuff. It's not even worth losing your career over. And the way that you're going about things is not the proper way of doing things. And you probably put such a bad taste in her mouth
Yeah.
that as soon as she sees your name on this offer,
Right.
right? Like, you can't legally, present it to the seller, obviously, but if there's two similar offers, right, they're probably going to go with the other one because of the way that you handle this situation.
Interesting.
So like,
Huh.
it was terrible. Like that, they already accepted it. But anyways, I called her last night and explained to her what happened, right? Why he was doing the way he was doing.
Yeah.
And her response to me was, I wish he would have called you a month ago. You are so nice and professional. This completely changes the situation. Obviously, we've already accepted. There's nothing we can do at this point. But if I would have known this before, right, we definitely could have worked something out. So he just lost that deal because of that. But I was able to completely smooth things over with her over the phone.
That's great.
And explain our position, right? Explain, what happened and really change her attitude so that by the end of the call, she's like, listen, if things fall out of contract or something goes wrong, you're the first person I'm going to call because I would love to work with you.
That's
so again,
great.
things can absolutely be done over the phone.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, and so I know I asked you the mindset question in relation to your current husband, but I guess I kind of put those together, but I meant just in general as well. Like, are there any key mindset shifts that you had, or was maybe you didn't, maybe it was just the aha moments with your dad and your husband now that just got you moving in the right direction and just made it happen. Cause you're like you said, you're very much take action kind of person. So maybe that's different for you, but I'm like, sometimes some guests, it's like there was a mindset shift that really had to happen first. So for you, was there even any, and if so, which ones were there? And maybe
those were the two like aha
that's what I figured.
Moments of, it wasn't even a shift. It was, I need to drastically change how I do things. But mindset shifts happen all the time. Right.
Well, but for you, that might be obvious, but for some people, not where you are at, Brie. I guess even if maybe they're usual for you, but if there's a way you could identify maybe when you were in corporate versus where you are today, like, is there anything you think about differently?
Absolutely everything.
That's
tons of stuff. But I said, like, so in my 9 years of corporate, I spent about 5 years at one particular company. And in the very beginning, I said I was in my early 20s when I started there. They had a book club. So every month they'd come out with a book, usually business related, mindset related, personal development related. Right. And they would give free copies of the book. And if you read it and took a test and you got whatever, 80% on the test, then you qualified for what they called President's Club. So if you read that book that month, took the test, which meant you actually read the book, President's Club was that you got to meet every week with the CEO of that division and talk about growth strategies, what's working, what's not working in the company, right? Where we can, this is a sales job, where we can make shifts in the sales force. So like I started very early on in my career with that mindset. And I'm one of those people, like, I like to win, so like, I always, like, I think in my first year of the company, I was in President's Club for 10 months. But that really got me in the habit of like reading. Right. And these personal, like, they were personal development books, sales books, business books, whatever. That continued throughout my life. Like I said, I listen to podcasts. That's one of my self-care things that I could do in my spare time. There's always a book recommendation, right? Read these books. That's where these mindset shifts come from. I said, like, the Getting Things Done book. Like, that was like a huge mind shift for me. And I got that recommendation from a friend when I was just talking about, like, I'm so overwhelmed. He's like, read this book. I went and got it, like, I think that weekend, and read it when we were going on vacation. Like, that's where there's tons of books. I can show you my library, of personal development, right? So you should always be shifting.
Yeah.
Throughout your entire life, you should always be shifting. You should always be looking for new ideas, right? Those new ideas come from reading books, listening to podcasts, right? Going to conferences. Those always really, like, I always come back from conferences with at least a half a page of things that I want to try or learn about, right? Or books to read,
Mm-hmm.
or people to talk to, whatever. So, like, it should be a progression of a constant evolution of development, right? Self-reflection is huge. Looking at yourself, every week. So self-reflection for me was looking at my weekly list. What did I spend my time on this week, and how can I make it better? And then
Yeah.
the next week I would try differently, and then, like, each week I would fine tune it. Like, that's all mind shift.
Mm-hmm.
That's all personal development,
Yeah.
right? So, listening to this podcast, other podcasts, right? How are you going to build your life into what you want? And it never happens overnight. I've had a few major shifts from going from corporate to then becoming a full-time real estate investor and owning my own brokerage firm, to cutting my hours and trying to work, less hours, spend time with my family. And right, it's going to shift again at some point.
Mm-hmm.
All that takes self-reflection and identifying and time. This whole working 60 hours a week, cutting it down to 30, that took like 6 months.
Wow.
That took time of me being constantly on top of it. How can I adjust? How can I improve? How can, that's what your life should be. So that's, if you're stuck in that corporate rut,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You commute an hour to some,
Yeah.
job that you don't love, right? And then you're there 9 hours a day, and then you commute home, and you come home and you just eat dinner and plop on the TV and watch TV, and you're not happy with your life, then change it. Changing it doesn't necessarily mean you don't need to quit your job to change it, right? But figure out what works for you, right? How can you incorporate, maybe start with self-care? Mine's going to the gym. My husband's is taking out his motorcycle. We work out our schedule so that we each get our self-care items every week, so that we have time to be ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
again,
love that. Yeah, that's awesome, Brie. It's just that a lot of the folks that we're talking to today are stuck in corporate.
yeah,
They have, so it's like, this is kind of where you are now. So it's great. And it's just nice reinforcement, because that's the same message we've been hearing throughout the series of interviews is read, improve yourself,
yeah,
listen to self-help, and keep, it's an iteration. And that's kind of what it's all about.
yeah.
Um,
So let's talk about, let's say you work in corporate, right? You're kind of stuck in this job. You've been there for 10 years. You've advanced throughout the 10 years, but you don't want to necessarily just quit your job and move on, right?
right.
What can you do? Because you're living paycheck to paycheck, right? You're making ends meet, you have enough money, but not enough to invest, right? Read blogs on personal finance. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's blogs, books, podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole FI community. Fire is the word they use for it. Start on that, right? Figure out budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
Mint.com is a great resource, right? Where's your money going? Again, this is all, whether this is your to-do list, how you spend your day, or where you spend your money. That's how we started budgeting too. We went to mint.com. They'll up you, link all your credit cards, your bank accounts, all that stuff, and it tells you where your money is going.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to my first husband and being like, you spent $800 a month on fast food,
Oh,
because he wouldn't make his own lunches for work. And he's like,
yeah.
well, I buy off the dollar menu. Like, I'm spending, $3-5, just like people talk about going to Starbucks every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a couple dollars. But when you look at it from like the back end of things, you're like, I'm spending $800 a month on Starbucks or eating out for lunch.
Right.
I could bring that down to $200,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, that's a mindset shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now you've got $600 more a month, right? Where's that money going to go?
Mm-hmm.
It could be spent on, again, more personal development. It could be spent on seminars, conferences, right? It could be put into savings to invest, right? What else can you cut?
Right. Right.
Do you need Hulu and HBO and Netflix and, are you spending $100 a month on cable? No. Do you primarily only watch 2 of them? Can you cut that down? So like this concept really bodes well to all aspects of your life. Now you've been budgeting for the last 3 months, right? You're able to save $1,000 a month than you were before. Now you're re-energized. Now you're excited, right? Where can I put this money? Where can I invest? Now you can start reading books about investments, right? Maybe you're going to invest in the notes. Maybe you're going to put the money in the stock market, whatever you want to do. But this is all a evolution process, right? And then after a year, you've got 12 grand, and now that 12 grand makes you 15 grand. So, this is the process that we build on.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I guess I usually typically ask 3 real quick lightning round questions. So I just thought I'd throw a few at you, Brie, if you're okay with it. Now, I know you've got a huge library, but I guess if you had to pick your favorite book recommendation, obviously Getting Things Done, huge game changer for you. But maybe other than that one, is there another book recommendation that would be a favorite of yours that you'd say people should not miss?
That's really like my big one that stands out in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, you can keep that. That's fine.
Because it was such like no book has come close. But I also like to, like The Walmart Effect is good. Never Split the Difference is also good. But as far as personal development, really it was Getting Things Done.
Okay, cool. Check those out. And then most admired person and why?
I really don't have one, to be honest.
Okay.
Because I don't focus on what other people are doing as far as their accomplishments in themselves versus mine. Again, I really like to keep things like in my bubble. I'm 99% concerned about what I'm doing and how I'm doing, and not comparing myself to others. But if I would have, I'd love to be Jeff Bezos though. Like, just all that money. Because that's, the way he built Amazon, and I am a huge Amazon person. But really, like, don't compare yourself to others. Your path is your path, right? Yeah. Everyone's path is different. I just don't like doing that. And
well, that's awesome. And for some, it's not easy to do. I almost say for you, your personality, it's like you're bold and it's like almost unapologetic, but it's kind of like how you are. So I don't know what you would say to someone who constantly does compare themselves.
Focus on yourself. Again, like it really comes down to, so it's when I was getting divorced, my first husband, his best friend's a therapist. He's a shrink. And I'd known him for 20 years. Yeah. And I was just through a conversation of talking to him. He's like, you got to realize, Brie, you can only control your actions and your reactions. Like, that's it. It's like, so when something happens to you, someone does something to you, right? I had a tenant burn down our building. Okay. I was on vacation. I get a phone call that our 4-unit building that we just bought is burned down to the ground. Like, what can I do? I can't go back in time. Right. Like, why? I'm going to enjoy my vacation. Like, the fire department came out, right? Red Cross came out. The insurance adjuster is going to come out, right? People can handle scheduling those appointments. But like, I'm not going to cry or get upset by it, because what can I do? It's done.
Right.
My reaction is that I'm not going to let it ruin my vacation. And I'm going to, let the proper people that are experienced. I've never had a fire. I don't know what to do. Let proper people who are experienced handle that. Right. And tell me how to move forward. But it was a really quick, like from 30 seconds of being told to like, okay, time to move forward then, let's just, is what it is. And that's what you got to do really, is like focusing on what your actions are and what your reactions are. And that's it. That's really it.
Yep. Not always easy to do, but you got it.
Sure. Not easy to do. Like,
I like that.
We're potty training my 3-year-old right now. She has an accident. Like, I'd love to, I got to clean up this mess. There's stuff everywhere. The baby's got, whatever. But like, you can't, you just try better next time. Let's clean it up and move on. And
you're teaching her that too. So that's awesome. Okay. And then I would say, two last questions. Advice you'd give your younger self, and that
Oh
could be on
God.
any topic, any
Mhm.
topic. It doesn't have to be work-life balance related.
Oh, there's 1,000 things I'd give myself. It's really funny when you're in your 20s, you think you know everything.
Mhm.
And then you get to your 30s and you're like, damn, I was dumb. And then you get to your almost 40s and you're like, wow, like what was I doing? Um, but I wish I would have expanded my mindset earlier.
Mhm.
It took my dad dying
Oh, yeah.
to that was my wake up call to expand my mindset outside of, corporate for life. Cause that's what I thought
Right.
I was going to do. I was going to be a CEO.
Yeah.
That was my life goal. And I was going to be on airplanes, right? Flying all over the world to important meetings because that's what I thought was success.
Mhm.
Um, and if I had opened my mindset when I was younger,
Mhm.
right, it would have been better for me. It still happened, but
Yeah.
because you're taught, go to college, go to a good school,
Like,
right, get a good degree, right, get a good job so you can pay off your hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans, right, and then what?
right.
Really, and what? Work there till your 60s,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
try to put money in the stock market in your 401k with your company match and like hope for the best.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's what the American path is right now.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. All right. And then the very, very final question, is there anything else that made the biggest difference for you on the work-life balance front? And again, you've given so much great
Let me
advice, so
check
I
my
appreciate
notes.
that. Yeah.
Because I did write down notes.
Yeah,
So
I just want to
when
make
you
sure
have
that
kids, they have something called mom brain,
yes.
which you don't grasp until you have kids.
Right.
And then you do, and you're like, wow, I need to write everything down because this is not going to go very well. I mean, that's really it. Like I said, focus on, it doesn't need to be, you know, fast, drastic improvements.
Yes. Yes.
It can start with small, read a book a month,
Mhm.
right? Listen to a podcast on your commute, right? Stop listening to the radio. Change it out for a podcast, like really just small things.
Yeah.
And I don't set goals for myself.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I like to explore and see where it takes me. you
Okay.
know
I like that.
I like to just try new things, right, and see what I'm into. It's like that's also some advice. But yeah, I mean, you
Well,
might
that's
you might not like real estate, right? Real estate's an
yeah.
answer for some people, it's not for
Right.
everyone.
Right.
You might like trading, right? You
Right.
might really start geeking out about trading and getting into that,
Right.
or budgeting,
Mhm.
said you got into helping people with work-life balance because
Yeah.
that was important to you, like, did you imagine that was your goal 5 years ago? I'm going
No.
to start a podcast and teach people work-life balance. No, it's something that you started like exploring and you
Yeah.
developed a passion for, right? And then you shifted your life,
Yeah.
right, and made it happen. So that's a natural progression of things. So, explore those things, see what comes up, right? See where your passions lie, take it into a direction that you didn't think you were going to go.
Yeah, and that actually surprised me, what you just said, Brie, in terms of not setting goals, because you're a high achiever. You're very successful. So all the, gurus on achievement, success, and all that, they all say start with a goal. So how do you? I mean, then
You can
how
do
do you?
some goals.
Okay,
So
continuing that, I'm like,
I mean,
whoa,
no, but in general, I don't. When people like, I do, if you ask me, like, what's your plan for the next 5 years? I
yeah.
have no idea. I
Wow,
have
okay,
literally no idea. But like small goals are good. So I said, if you worked corporate sales, I used to work in inside sales,
okay, yeah,
dialing 100 dials a day
yes,
kind of environment, right? Boiler room type stuff. Um, but that's how I started my career in corporate, Uh, but so my boss at the time would ask, like, what's your goals, right?
yeah,
They can be, whatever financial. Like, I wanted a boat. We live in Chicago, right? Boats in the summer are like,
oh, nice,
awesome goal. So like he had me put a picture of a boat next to my phone. And when I didn't feel like doing 20 more dials, I'd look at my boat and be like, I want to buy that boat by next summer. It's like that was a good motivator, and
yeah,
I ended up buying that boat the next year.
wow,
It's like those kind of things, right? Like
yeah,
we want to take a vacation, right? We're gonna go to Europe for a month in spring. Like those kind of goals are fine. But as far as like business goals
uh-huh,
and where I want to be in 5 years, I don't have any of those.
Yeah.
I really like to explore,
Yeah. Yeah.
new things, right? Explore ideas, see where it makes sense to me, see where my passion lies, and then really just go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Brie.
Yeah.
You've been like such a surprise. Like all the cool things that you shared are so valuable. Where can people find you? Let people know. And
Yes. So my social media handle is Chicago Brie. So CHICAGOBRIE. That's I'm not really on Instagram very more, but Bigger Pockets, LinkedIn, as well as Facebook as all Chicago Brie. And then our summit event is coming up in spring. So if you're in the Midwest area, you want to learn about real estate investing, it's a great event for all different aspects of real estate, all different levels. And that's MidwestRESummit.com.
that is awesome. That is really, really awesome. Well, so we'll link all of your contact info
Cool.
in the link below. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Brie was absolutely fantastic and so happy you joined us.
Thank you so much.